Hello, hello. Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I am Sean. Schoenmacher is the owner of Action Coach Dallas, where we are helping business owners build and grow their businesses to ultimately improve their lives. Today, we have Dan Flick, the owner of Infinity Financial Group. And so how you doing, Dan?
How are you, Sean?
Doing well. Glad to have you on with us. Appreciate you coming
Thank
on
you.
board. Yeah, so we have Dan as our guest, and he's going to tell us about some of his journey and best practices, and we'll get some good questions and some good answers, good responses from Dan. And if this is your first time on the channel, again, as we like typically say, make sure you like, subscribe to get those notifications when we drop some of these next videos into the channel, so you can continue to get all the good value from our conversations. And so, Dan, without further ado, maybe you could introduce us to your company and tell us about the problems that you solve.
Okay, John. I have Infinity Finance Group. We've been in business as Infinity since late '07, early '08. Good year to start, right? Uh, and
Did something
we
happen
are,
back then, or
yeah. Well, it's kind of happening again. Depending on what day it is.
hopefully not, Dan?
Uh,
Hopefully not. Yeah.
and so, anyway, what we are is we're uh, an investment banking firm, a specialty boutique investment banking firm with three partners, including myself and a consultant, uh, healthcare consultant, which is my wife, because she is a lifelong healthcare executive, nurse, and years and years of experience. So when we have a healthcare opportunity, she's always our consultant. And so my other partners are corporate finance people. And we do two things. We do sell side mergers and acquisitions where we represent privately held, closely held, family owned businesses
Okay.
to sell or help them with their financing. And the reason we do financing as well is that my whole life I was born and raised in a lending family. My father had a chain of small savings and loan in Oklahoma. And uh, as a result, my early days was as a lender. And then the 80s came along and early 90s, and I found a good 12-step program to get out of lending. And so went into corporate finance, helping people that needed their businesses financed. And so I did that for a number of years. And then in 2001, came to Dallas from Tulsa to learn sell side mergers and acquisitions. You know, having sold businesses, I never actually, as a principal, never sold businesses as an agent. And so I joined Allegiance Capital, who the owner of that business taught me the nuances of how to help these privately held, closely held, family owned businesses. They have, and a reason I wanted to do that and got into it was because I was born and raised in a family owned business. I
Mhm.
understand the dynamics of that and then closely held businesses. They have characteristics that are every one of them is different, but that yet the same. So I was very successful at that in the early part of 2000s, from '04 to through till I started Infinity. I was doing very, very well at it. And so started my own, and I've had it now 18 years here in Dallas. And we work, you know, mainly, I've worked in about every state, but now I work mainly regionally, you know, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Colorado, Kansas. That's kind of my area.
I mean,
And
that's
uh,
almost like a few countries when you add it all up, right? So,
what Texas alone is
yeah.
kind of three worlds in itself. And so uh, we help businesses that are kind of the north. normal type businesses. We don't do high tech
Yeah.
where it's or software. It's because I really don't understand it.
Yeah.
And so we help
Who
businesses
does?
like, yeah, yeah, it's like we help them with uh, the type of business like I've done pipeline construction.
Mhm.
Not many people know a lot about that, but I've kind of become an expert in that. Our firm sold the largest non-union pipeline construction company in the United States one a couple of years ago. And but I also do manufacturing,
Mhm.
service industries. Uh, I've done retail. Um, just really about any kind of business you'd normally understand.
Yeah.
Um, but if it's too complicated, if
Yeah.
I can't really put my hand on it, I don't do it. I've done energy services, doing one now that is about an $80 million company, and that makes about 10 million a year. The two brothers want to sell the majority, but they will stay on as partners
Yeah.
because they are uh, His, two Hispanic brothers that realize that we know what we're doing, but to get this thing to a big, big business, we need bigger partners.
Yeah.
And so we specialize in that. And
Cool.
I help these guys do those transitions.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and there's so much that goes into all of this, of course. And I chat with business owners regularly, and some of them are pretty small, and they're like, "Yeah, well, my business isn't that big, so how hard is it to sell it, or how hard is it to And I'm like, hard, right? And the bigger ones, obviously, even harder because it's typically more complexity. But there's so many factors of why a deal could fall apart. The financing you mentioned, I mean, I heard of a deal the other day that had like six different types of financing combined, right? Like some stock, some owner seller financing. Obviously, there was a bank in there. There was like delayed debt. I mean, there was all these different things that went into kind of the whole purchase. And it's like I think you having the expertise, even with so much depth on the finance side, I don't people don't even realize how much creativity you can gain with that. I think it's actually really impressive to see when deals get done with pretty creative, financing, and I think a lot of people just they don't. I mean, that's not what they do a lot of, so they just don't even really know all those different options. So I'm sure the people you work with are happy that you can be that resource for them.
I,
Uh,
the rule of thumb too on you talked about the company there with uh, the various how many layers of financing there were.
yeah,
The more layers, the higher the chance of failure.
of course. Yeah, because if any one of them doesn't work out, right, then it doesn't work.
That's right.
So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But again, sometimes the deal can't get done or won't get done if you don't have maybe at least a few options. So, but yeah,
Exactly.
anyways, and that's where, of course, you come in and help these deals get done. So,
Right. And
um,
every one of those has to have various flexibilities. And you still have, it's like a piece of clay. One starts breaking off, you got to put a valve back together and then get them going and
yeah,
stretch them out. It's an art. It's not
yeah.
it's not a
Oh,
science.
for sure. I've seen the science work out perfectly. And then the art or, the owner or the sellers changes their mind or the buyer changes their mind. I mean, there's just so many things that of course get in the way. So
I've seen everything that you can imagine that
yeah,
can cause these things to go south from, the owner's wife running off with the CFO. I mean, I've seen it
woo,
all. I
all
have
right,
seen it all, Sean. I
man.
really have.
Yeah, I tell you. So obviously, if you've seen it all, then you're going to help these people better understand these potential hurdles so that they don't,
Right.
of
Hmm.
course, fall over. Right. Um, so you mentioned family businesses and a couple different, or a few different industries. So who primarily does your business serve? If I was in the audience, how would I know if I'd be a good fit for your service?
Well, first of all, you need to be an operating business that is profitable. In other words, it's a company that and for me to work on it, they need to be making like a net income of no less than 2 to 3 million.
Okay.
And the reason that's on the very low end, and the reason for that is that the buyer's market at about 3 million, what we call EBITDA, earnings
Yeah.
before interest, taxes, and depreciation, amortization, depreciation. That's kind of the demarcation of where the real money starts. Below that, you're selling, Bill and Ruth's submarine shop. And
I haven't seen a lot of those, but
and
I like
and
it.
and
I like it.
and look, that's a business in its own. I call
Mhm.
those business brokers. And there's a market,
Mhm.
there's a need, but it's not the area in which I play.
Right.
Um, uh, so there's the business broker, which is generally below 2 to 3 million, and then above. And then when you get to the largest one I did was about $180 million business. It had a EBITDA of adjusted at around 28 million weighted average over 5 years. And that company was actually easier to sell
Mhm.
than the ones that are the $3 million adjusted EBITDA business. Uh, Generally, and it's always into the numbers, the accounting, and the controls. The
Yeah.
big difference between, and running your own business, the bigger you get, more business you do, the more complex it is to know what the hell it is you're making or not making.
Yeah.
And so that what I would say is where the who I can help is those guys at 3 million and 2 million in net income because their
Yeah.
EBITDA is going to be higher
Yeah.
and above. And above, like I say, the large ones when you get up to over 15 million in EBITDA, then you're looking at the public market,
Yeah.
uh, bigger buyers, you know, big four accounting firms. And actually it's a whole different ball game. Like
Yeah.
public and private. I'm private. I don't do public. Public, after Sarbanes-Oxley and uh, the scandals of the early part of this century, um, they changed the accounting rules. It's a lot harder and way too expensive to compete with, Houlihan Lokey or
Mhm.
J.P. Morgan. I'm my company is small potatoes. I deal with small potato people, and
Well,
in my opinion,
it's all
the
relative, Dan.
best. In my opinion, the
Yeah.
best people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably why you do it, right? So,
I know it. They're more like me, when we all work and everybody's made a written payroll check, and maybe we know what it's like.
yeah. Good stuff. What makes your business unique? Why do clients choose you?
Well, one the reason is because who's doing it. That's that. This sounds self-serving and gloating, but it's me and my partners. We're senior guys. We've been up and down the road. We've made every mistake that can be made. And from that, we've learned how to take those years of experience and help people and help them. And we know and we're very honest with them. Can you do it? Yes, you can do it. What can I expect? Here's what you can expect. Giving them a real outline of where we see, because we deal with it every day. They've never dealt with it.
Mhm.
And and I tell them all this too. What makes it different is that what if they're selling their business, I let them know that we understand this is not business. This is personal because it is. Their business is who they are. And so you have to understand that dynamic of what they're all about. Numbers are numbers, but business is a lot more than just numbers. It's the people. And the first thing buyers look at is the numbers. Second thing they look at is the people. And they've got to match up and they got to like both of them.
Mhm.
And so, and the rest is just noise, you know. So that's my difference is that it's a real personal touch and it's dealing with guys with a lot of experience. It's like one of my brothers is my partner,
Mhm.
Pat, brother Pat. He lives in Charleston and he retired a year ago. He was the COO of Citigroup Capital over all of Asia.
Mhm.
But we go, one of your things here is what was your biggest failure? What is the biggest thing that went wrong with you? Well, that was our family owned business of savings and loans. My father's business of 40 years going out of business overnight.
Mhm.
My brother Pat was the CEO of it. Had nothing to do with what we didn't make bad loans. It wasn't anything like that. It was just liquidity. It was like a wonderful life was this what happened in that savings and loan. Not just us. He had to go to work for the government closing banks for the 80s.
Yeah.
And with those hard experiences, literally when the savings and loan closed, my brother had to go out in a housing development and to get up on a roof, finishing roofs
Mhm.
to get it finished. And he did it himself. And he goes from there, 20, 15 years later, he's running Asia
COO.
for Citigroup, you
Yeah.
know. So, but those
Yeah.
times were very hard,
Yeah.
very hard. My dad lost everything, but those experiences what build you. And we really lost it big time. No one could expect you couldn't explain how bad those times were in the 80s in Oklahoma and Texas and Colorado and Louisiana. It was they need to write more stories about it because people think, well, '08 was bad. '08 was nothing
Yeah.
compared to the 80s.
Yeah.
And so but it was regionalized. So anyway, that that's what I do different.
Yeah, yeah, that's why they pick you. So you talk about how all these years of trials, tribulations, the hard times that they've built you, right? They've built some of the character that you have and who you are as an individual. And you mentioned this with your clients, how their business is it's who they are. And so we talk a lot about in our business with clients uh, identity. And of course, you've built an identity over many years, and that's one of the reasons why your clients choose you. And these business owners that you work with, they have an identity, and many times it's pretty intertwined with the business, which, as you mentioned, starts to make it way more personal and harder usually to shift. I mean, usually identity is one of those things that takes some time to shift. And so when you say, hey, you know, once this is done, next month or next year or whatever the time frame is, you're going to be a different person. That's not always easy to do, right? And but
No.
again, you've been through it, you've seen it, and you're well versed in it, which helps
Well,
them.
what on every deal I close in the when I'm selling a business, I really like the the owner to stay on for at
Yeah.
least 3 years. Now, some I will not take on a customer if he says, I want my check and I'm out. I'm out. I don't do it. Because
Yeah.
anybody writing a big check doesn't want to see the guy run out the door.
Right.
And also, it's personal. I tell them, I said, do you think you need emotionally 3 years to work inside this business, help the buyers, and ease yourself out emotionally? And I said, it ain't a month. It takes at least 3 years. When I sold that pipeline construction company, it was in the third year, and at the end of the third year, he got a bonus of 12 million bucks.
Not
And
too shabby of a bonus.
no, and you know what he did with that bonus? He gave it all away to the five guys that made him who he was. All of it. One was a Hispanic mechanic, got a part of that. And but in the third year, I asked him. I said, Max, are you glad you stayed? He said, oh, absolutely. He says, Dan, but now here in the third year, it's like getting up is like going having to go to the dentist's office every morning. I said, you're ready, Max. You're ready to retire now.
That's fun.
And that's the transition you have to make internally and emotionally to leave or something you've built successfully. You've worked your ass off your whole life. It just doesn't happen overnight. And so I advise from my experience, let's stay a while.
Yeah,
Let's get you eased out and you help them achieve their goal.
yeah,
They don't want to buy something and not win.
of course.
So
Yeah.
that's my lecture.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that a lot of people probably don't fully understand to the depth that maybe would be useful if they did, and that is the length of time that goes into buying or selling things, right? Like you mentioned, of course, the back end, once it's officially sold, right? You have, these potentially 3 years of transition interchange time. And then there's usually, if you want to sell a business and sell it for top dollar, you're gonna probably need 2 or 3 years on the front side of making sure it's kind of ready and wrapped up and financials are good and all that kind of stuff. And it's like it takes that's a long time. And so if you're not looking at it that far into the future, you're probably not, you're not going to get the best result. And again, just goes to show, if you can chat with someone like you, for example, as soon as possible, even if you're not considering it today, hey, I'm thinking about selling in maybe a couple of years. That's fantastic, right? Because there's so much time that goes into the whole thing. So you mentioned the hardest thing that you went through being the fallout in the 80s and how that's kind of built you over time. What about as an employer? What have been some of the bigger learnings you've had as an employer?
Well, when I was an employer, now I'm not really an employer. I've got partners. But when I was an employer, I felt how I learned how what a rotten manager I was.
All right.
I it's I had 33 women working for me in a mortgage banking operation, and I was young, much younger, way younger. I was in my 30s, and I had no idea how to handle that. Today, they have these HR people that are all specialists in dealing with all that stuff. But when it's a small company, I mean, HR back then was called payroll, and and that's all they did. They managed the insurance and the payroll and that. But the hiring and firing mainly was me, and I was terrible at that. You know, I'm either too nice or too tough. And so I learned that managing people and employees, it's this sounds rough, but it is a piece of equipment in this business are the people. And you've got to maintain that, but you can't it has to be measured and run right and it's a tough deal, and I failed at it. So I learned from those experiences that, man, you're just not very good managing people. You're fine at managing yourself and helping others, but you know, managing Bambi with her problems that can't be at the office because she's in a divorce with her husband. I'm, t-
Yeah,
you know, I don't
yeah.
do that. I mean, so that's I learned that's you've got to be far more professional in handling people. And
And
I'm
so,
sure there's a lot of smart people could add to that, but that
yeah,
was where I had trouble.
but yeah, so you learned it, and then now you're steering around it, right? Like you said, you don't manage a bunch of people anymore. You got partners, right? So it's a different. So hey, if I'm not good at this, let's figure out how not to do it. Right? Let's figure out what I can do that doesn't have me doing the management of 30 something people, because hey, that's not a good use of my time. So
Well, and like when it comes to your employees, I'm talking to companies that are looking at doing something like that, I always ask them, I said, do you do your own payroll and your own insurance and stuff? And if they say yes, I said, have you considered a payroll service that does all this? I said, you'll save money. And I said, it's professional and it's outsourced and they take care of debit cards. You don't have to do that.
yeah.
And also, if you do that, you never have any trouble with the IRS on 941 taxes because they take care of all that and they take that liability.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can lead to a lot of bad things if you do have trouble on those fronts. So what about if you were to start over? If you started over your current business today, what would you do different?
I would have a little bit more education in the area of analytical analysis. And by that, I say, because when we sell a company now, we use accountants a lot to help our client get through what they call these quality of earnings reports.
Hmm.
Well, to do that, you really need to be a person who has been an auditor or a controller or a CPA that does that stuff. Uh, I've always been able to really read financial statements, but to really break those down and how they create those reports, I would have a little stronger education in that area.
I, so- we talked about this a little earlier, the accounting and it's interesting. We look at P&Ls all the time, and you would think I feel like the brain says, "Hey, I'm looking at numbers on a profit and loss statement. It must be accurate." Right? But it's like, obviously someone put those numbers on there, right? So there could be all kinds of errors. But so anyways, I feel like it takes a little bit of learning to kind of realize that, hey, what I'm looking at on this profit and loss statement is theory. In theory,
Right.
these are the numbers, but you need
Right.
like, people to prove that they're real and they're accurate. And that, I mean, of course, there's so many mistakes that can happen, especially when you have a huge company. I mean, it's actually it's actually probably 99% likely that it's incorrect to some degree. Just the question is how incorrect, right?
Never gotten a balance sheet
Yeah,
that if you dug into,
yeah,
you would not find errors.
right,
Now, I'm not talking material errors,
yeah,
but the way they've handled the depreciation on a truck. In other words, you will find little errors,
yeah,
some to your benefit, some not.
yeah,
But even the good companies, the ones that have the money to afford those kind of processes with the good staff and outside accounting firms, there's not one balance sheet you could not find an error in.
right. Yeah, and those are trained professionals. Try to do that. What if you're not the trained professional? It's like, man,
Exactly.
it's a challenge point for sure. And again, why it's just another thing that can break a deal down. So
Well, let's say Susie's putting in the details on, uh, you know, corporate backhoe that they bought, and maybe she erred on something regarding the that would impact the depreciation on that. Now, not big, not material, but if really looked at, oh, we should have done it this way to be in line with that.
yeah,
And so that's why I'm saying you can't give me a balance sheet if they let you have the access that you
yeah,
wouldn't find some error.
yeah. Yeah, I just think it's a really refreshing idea. Well, I say refreshing, challenging, whatever, but it's good to be thinking, hey, look, I'm looking at something that I see what's being presented. Let's make sure it's somewhat close to correct, right? So,
Yeah,
and
that that's why everybody in a buying a company or selling a company always put a fudge factor in there for things that are going to be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And that's why, good, of course. This is why due diligence takes a lot of time. It takes a decent bit of time, and all these other factors, of course. So, what about what's next for you, Dan? What would be the next goal? What's the next milestone? Obviously, you've achieved various, not plateaus, but milestones and so forth along the way. What's the next goal or milestone for you?
Well, the next for me, Sean, I'm at the tail end of my career, right? So really now it's about continuing what I'm doing, staying healthy so that I can really be of value to those that are engaging me. Because I only get paid on success.
Yes.
Now we get paid a little bit of expenses and maybe a small retainer, but I don't make any money unless we succeed.
Right.
And so that's kind of a risky deal for
Proposition.
me,
Yeah.
but it's what the customers really like and understand that I'm actually risking with them.
Mhm.
They're risking hiring me, and I'm risking working my butt off for months and not making any money, lose my ass on it. And I have.
Mhm.
Uh, so next with me is to stay focused, help the people that I actually can help, because I won't take on deals that are mission impossible. And there again, keep my health in order, get to stay in the gym, go to the gym. I go 3 days a week. I have a trainer, but
Yes.
Sean, I'm 75. You know, there's only so much runway a human being has. But right now I'm in good shape. And so I'm going to keep helping people when I can. Retirement, I can't think about retirement because I'd be bored to tears.
Mhm.
It'd be terrible. I'd hate it. So that's the future for me.
Good. Help more. Stay healthy. Help more people. I like it.
That's right.
So before we get into the final question, how can others learn more about you or your company? How can they get in contact?
Say that again.
Before we get into the last question, if people want to learn more, how can people learn more about you and the company? How can they get in contact?
Well, I suggest that they go to my website, ifgroup.us.com, and look me up. Uh, Give me a call. Send me an email. Uh, Ask any questions you want. Um, but you'll see on my website, as you've seen, kind of enough to know if I'm a business that you might want to use or that somebody who might be able to help you. That's what I would recommend.
Nice. Cool. And last question, any special offers you'd like to offer any listeners?
Well, I, you know, I don't do special, and so I would say that the most I could offer is invite somebody to give me a call, and if they want to just chat about anything, ask about a problem, they don't have to give me a lot of information about detail, but I would impart for them just for reaching out to me, share with them some of my 50 years of business and advice, without charge.
Oh, that sounds valuable. Awesome.
Well, some people might think that. My
Uh-huh.
wife, she wouldn't pay much for that.
Yeah, well, not sure your wife's gonna be one of your customers anytime soon either. So,
Yeah.
but cool. Well, yeah, appreciate having you on, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully the audience got some good nuggets, takeaways from some of the stories that you were able to tell us about. And so, until next time, have a great one, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, Sean. I truly appreciate it.